And what I'll do at the end is read through a Q&A. And then just a few more notes before we get started. Everything I'm going to be showing today are just samples. We have about 15 verticals. So after this, if it piques your interest and you like the look and feel, what we can do is set up a one-on-one demonstration where we gather your requirements and then subsequently show you examples that fit those requirements. So without further ado, where I want to start is by going through and just introducing us as a company. For those folks that aren't familiar with us, we're really in the core performance management space, and what differentiates us, on the Magic Gartner, for example, is really the fact that we are Excel-based. So you're building everything in Excel, but you're deploying it on the web. And then second, what differentiates us is our tight integration to Dynamics. And what you'll see is we start off in the Dynamics space, and we're really the preferred Microsoft vendor because we're fully built on the Microsoft stack. And we just released our new cloud multi-tenant version, which we're in Microsoft Azure. If you don't need to go with the on-premise or hosted version of BI360. And again, we can chat a little more about the infrastructure requirements on an individual case-by-case basis. That said, kind of the theme that should be consistent throughout the presentation is it's really meant for finance and accounting teams to be able to create the templates. It's not dependent on IT. And also, it's one platform for both budgeting, forecasting, and reporting. So you can actually report off of the data that you budget. And this is the very last slide before we get into the product itself. And this is how effectively all of the components fit together. So BI360 has 4 areas. It has reporting, it has budgeting and forecasting, and dashboards and a warehouse. And the way it all comes together is over here on the left-hand side, we do replace Management Reporter. So if you wanted to not only replace MR, but have everything in Excel and drill down into the subledger, you can do that. And we had previous sessions that illustrated how to build a template. However, then once you want to load other data sources, build a report that looks across maybe your payroll system, maybe your CRM, you can do that. And after building a report, you add some functionality and turn it into an input form. And what an input form is essentially budgeting and forecasting. And the rule of thumb here is, what's nice is you start in Excel and you develop the budgeting piece in Excel as well. And from a deployment perspective, you're going to have 2 options. You could either deploy it on the web or you could deploy it in Excel. So again, to reiterate, you build everything in Excel that's connected to a database, so you automate a lot of the links. You don't have a bunch of spreadsheets everywhere. You have 1 or 2 or 3 spreadsheets that you modify. Then from there, you deploy everything on the web, where you will also have access to reports and dashboards, or you could deploy everything in Excel. So your user opens Excel, opens a folder, and inputs his or her own templates. Okay. So let's go in and let's start off and take a look from an end user's perspective, right? So great, you're done implementing BI360. How does it look like from a budgeting and forecasting perspective? What I'll do here is I'll log in. I'm going through the internet, log in with my credentials. And this is actually extremely important because Excel doesn't really have security, right? Here, what I'm doing is I'm logging in with my specific credentials, and based on those credentials, I'll only be able to see the specific departments, companies, accounts that are assigned to me. It's also based on templates. So I'll only be able to see the specific both budgeting, forecasting, and reports that are assigned to me. Now, there are many ways you can set this up in terms of format. You can set up different views. You could put your own company in the background as a logo. You can leverage the search button. The point here is you don't really want to scroll through all of these templates. And since you logged in there with your unique credentials, what you can do is toggle certain templates as favorites and then go inside and see the ones that you think are most applicable to your business. Now, think about it from an administrator's perspective. While that's great, you want to kind of create a little hierarchy of the way users forecast and then budget and then view their templates. So over here on the left-hand side, you can go through and create a hierarchy for your users. And we'll go straight into it, and we'll say, hey, from a high-level perspective, what do we want to do, right? This is something we, as a company, recently added for ourselves, and we highly encourage, other folks to do it. What it is we said, hey, these goals, we kind of have them internally on a PowerPoint, but why not, since you have the ability to store data back, why not just let you pull in your head count, your cash, and store it into a database? And the reason that's useful is you can then track it and then easily report and build KPIs off of it. So in our example, you could go in and say, great, here's going to be my revenue. Next year, you can go in and say, here's going to be the number of customers that we anticipate on having. Point is, you go and then you store that data back into that data warehouse, okay? Making it easily available for you to retrieve off later. And then, what you can also do is not only can you add your strategy here, if you want, you can also add tasks, right? So here, based on perhaps those goals, what you want to do is go through and assign certain tasks, all right? Well, you go in and expand this out a bit. You can go and assign who's responsible for tasks, the status of those, and then you can view, if you wanted to, who's finished and not. Okay? Again, something we just added recently. It's kind of nice to see the results of everything on one tab. Now, going back a little more practically and saying, all right, well, I have GP right now. Okay? I have management reporter, and let's say I budget in Excel. What's the benefit of a tool like yours? What I'll do is I'll go through, open up a departmental forecast, and pick out my parameters, all right? So all these templates are driven based on parameters, and those are things such as companies or department. This is where security kicks in again. So if I'm an executive that's, say, limited to just seeing, sales and marketing and HR, those are going to be the only templates that I'll be able to see. Okay. I'll expand this out, ran it for September. I get 9 months of actual, all of the data I can drill into, and I can drill both into the general ledger summary as well as the detail information. So if I wanted to see vendor or subledger detailed information, I can pull that out. Here, I could go in, I could just type numbers in. I could use, some Excel formulas if I wanted to do an average of, say, last year or current year, multiply that by, 20% or something. Can do that, then go through and store that data back into the database. And what's the point of storing it, right? Well, let's pretend, off the previous example, you're an MR, you're using Excel, and it's now October, and you want to reforecast for the rest of the year. What you'd have to do is copy and paste the data from Management Reporter into Excel, consequently creating a second spreadsheet and having, 2 spreadsheets now, right? What you're doing with our software, and instead of that, because of our integration to Dynamics, you're going in saying, hey, it's now October, click a button, expand it, and October automatically gets filled in with actual data that I can drill into. What's the benefit of it? Well, you're no longer copy and pasting, so you're eliminating the manual errors that could occur. And then secondly, you're saving time. Yeah, instead of using 2 templates, you have 1. But now multiply that for all of your departments, all of your forecast versions, and that's really where you start seeing the time saving, right? Is here you're going in saying, well, I now want to run this for finance and accounting. Maybe I want to run it for a different company or something. And you're clicking a button and it's automatically appearing here. And over here, you can always view, the previous departments. Okay? And so very useful from that perspective. Now, let's go back and say, all right, that's a very simple example. What else can you do? And I'll show you a very nice modeling template. And again, pick based on parameters here. I'll pick September, expand this out. And what this template did, if I look at it, and again, you'll be able to customize this, right? This is just an example. What this template did is gave you 9 months of data, year to date in this column. And it said, hey, based on that performance, if seasonality continued, here's how you would be based on every single account. You'd be at 18 million in revenue, right? And if I scroll down, it said if seasonality continued, it goes in and says you'll be at 515,000 net income. The way, by the way, it calculated that, it basically divides it by the percentage. So say you're a seasonal business in the last 3 months, you had 60% of the revenue and 60% of the expenses were driven from the last 3 months in 2016. Great. It'll use that percentage and say, okay, well, you should be at 515,000 this year, right? However, the point of this is to model. So you're saying, no, I know my net income is actually going to be closer to 700,000. Maybe you could do pro forma modeling. Maybe you have a huge contract. Maybe you just know your business is going to change in some way, shape, or form. Once you input that information, you can see over here on the left-hand side all of the single accounts and their forecast adjusted accordingly in order to reach that 700,000 here, okay, as a desired net income. Now, let's take it a step further, and oops, didn't mean to do that. And let's say specifically, I know my revenue is going to grow by 10%. Scroll up, and I can see that what it did was it adjusted revenue here by 10%. Now, also I know, let's say my operational expenses are going to grow by 7%. What it does, if I scroll down here, it increases operational expenses by 7%, right? So you're modeling all of this out. Let's take it even one step further and say, and for you, by the way, this doesn't have to be by department. This can be by cost center, by program, whatever. You can go and say specifically, operational expenses are going to grow because we're going to hire a bunch of sales and marketing executives. Push that by 8%. Now, if we look at it, 7% increase for total finance and accounting, right? 7% increase for HR. But if I continue scrolling down for sales and marketing, it now increased it by 15.56%, right? So it takes those totals and scrolling down, we're still at 700,000. So it adjusted every single account based on its proportion in the P&L. Okay, and really the point of this, you store that back, then you could send it out to, let's say, your sales and marketing executive, and they can go in here and say, hey, no way is advertising going to grow 15%. Let's decrease it by 9%. Click enter, that what if changes, and all the accounts adjust accordingly, right? So very useful for modeling. And hopefully the theme that's kind of consistent is, yeah, you go in next month. These are all Excel formulas, by the way, that were created, but they're automated, right? So if you go in next month and it's now October, you click a button, the form will automatically change to give you October data in this column, right? And it divides it out by 2 months now instead of 3, right? To give you the annualized actual. And then you can go through, follow that exercise again, and save it perhaps as forecast version 2 or 3. Let's go back and let's say, great, you can forecast simply, you can do some complex modeling. What else, right? And I'll go into budgeting. Notice how I have a lot of different examples. I'm just showing you a few here. And to do that, let's start off and I'll show you assumptions. And for us, this is, I'm just using an example for payroll. For you, this can be any revenue or expense driver. And I've seen a lot of customers say this is going to be, let's say, my economic conditions. So if the economy does, not that well, mid or high, I'll input that, and then it's going to spread it out to the income statement, the balance sheet, and so on. I could here say, if I'm in the business of healthcare, this can be beds. If I'm in the business of distribution, it could be your different distribution centers and your locations, whatever drivers are relevant. But here's the concept, right? I'll go in and just say my FICA rate is going to be 7.25 instead, and then I save that data back into the database. What's the point of doing that? Only the budget manager will do that, the 7.25. The department heads, they shouldn't really care about that. The only thing they should really care about is going in, and I think I lost my GoToMeeting here, apologize. So the only thing they should worry about is going in here, and when they go into this folder, they won't see assumptions. They'll just see their own personnel template, okay? And here, I set it up from an administrator's perspective, so you can select all of them. But absolutely, you can have it set up so it just pulls in one department for your users, so they don't have to select. Point is, I'll expand this. You see for administration, because that's the department I picked, all of your full-time and your part-time employees, right? You scroll over here, and it's going to calculate everything else on your behalf after you input what's in yellow. To follow through the example, let's just go in here and say that Tracy is going to get a promotion to senior VP, and that can happen in May of next year. We could put an end date, we could put the salary, and we can say that's going to increase in November by 4%. We can go and say, great, they're eligible for benefits. Scroll down. If we do want to hire a part-time employee, say we want to hire a admin intern, we'll go and say this is the date we're going to do it. These are the hours, and this is the actual rate, right? And it says to be hired number 1. Now, by the way, where is it pulling the full-time, part-time employees, the hire dates, the rates, and all that? That's coming from your payroll system. So that data doesn't have to live in GP. Like I showed in the architecture, we have a warehouse that you can pull all that data in for one unified vision here. Okay. Great, input what's in yellow, and now if I scroll over here, right, and look at Tracy, I can see that the salary started in May, right? I continue scrolling through. We see the total compensation. We see the taxes and benefits. And what it does now, it uses that 7.25 FICA rate, right? So it uses that 7.21, calculates everyone's minimum maximum, and it does that, right, because I input that 7.25 in the previous template, okay? Very important. I'm no longer using links in Excel that might break. I put that in, and now it's used to calculate everyone's minimum maximum here, right? I continue scrolling through, your FICA FUTA SUTA calculates your minimum maximums, and so forth. Okay? So no links in Excel. Now, I always demonstrate this, and there's companies that say that's fantastic, but really, we don't have every department head inputting. We want to do it more of a approach where the Office of Finance picks a few of the departments. To show you the flexibility of this, I'll go in and say, here's administration, here's this department, and maybe here's 3 departments I'll pick out. I'll click OK, click a refresh button, and it'll actually say, hey, are you sure you don't want to save those changes, Alex? I'll say yes. And now when I expand this out, it says for administration, here are your full-time, part-time employees. It's going to store down to the general ledger. So continue scrolling down. For sales and marketing, here's full-time, part-time, stores down to the general ledger, and HR, right? Full-time, part-time, and stores down to the general ledger. So it can absolutely do top-down and both bottom-up. Skip over here. Let's go back, and you're saying, hey, can you do operational? Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I'll just show you kind of capital expenses. But you can model out your quantities, your price, whatever's relevant to your model. All right, here's an example of CapEx. I'll go and say, I want to purchase new equipment. It'll belong to this department. I could put a description here. So maybe this is for your computers. It has the life. Where's the life coming from? It's coming from the very first template that I showed to you, right? So again, no links in Excel. You go through, you type that number in. Maybe I want to purchase 6 of these computers for HR. It says, here's the capital expenditure, and it goes through and depreciates it on your behalf, right? Maybe kind of one more just kind of quick template is, and this is, you can go through and I'll add the sales reps that I want, right? You can pick those out. You could pick customers. And what I'll do here is I'll say, all right, I want to budget the quantity and the gross margin by month, right? So I can say for January, here's my quantity, here's the gross margin, and it'll calculate the COGS for you. Continue going down here, do that for February, and so forth. So, you can really get pretty sophisticated in terms of budgeting specifically by customers, by products, and so on. Okay? Let me show you a final template that I think is extremely important. And we set this up with operational expenses, but for you, this can be any template. You pick your parameters here. What I'll do here is expand it out. You can see that your total budget, and this will be blank for you guys. But over on the right-hand side, we see the actuals and the forecast. And by the way, guess where that forecast is coming from, right? It's coming from the very first template that I showed to you. You can drill into this data, both forecast and actuals. You can scroll down here and see that, hey, this is all the accounts that are coming on other forms. Okay? If you did want to say, hey, we want a budget version number 2 or something like that, great. You can go down here, click OK, and now because I picked up this, it'll show you this, 2015 budget. Okay. What's the point? Well, I already showed you. Yeah, you could just type this into Excel, right? You could type in and click Store Data. However, what if what you want to do is say, exactly what kind of conferences did we go to? What you can have your users do is right-click. And maybe right underneath here, you want to add some line item details. And this is, needless to say, going to be really useful for your travel and entertainment, right? Where you can go down and say, maybe we attended the BI360 conference, and that's going to happen in August. And here's how much money we spent on travel and airfare and other things. And now specifically, where do you actually say that? Well, we spent that on BI360 conference, and right here, you could add a little note here that says, flights were $1K because of last minute booking. Okay? So you can have, kind of much more interactive and actually add notes now to those line item details. Right? Underneath here, you can say maybe seminar for finance team, and you can continue adding notes here, all right? Dynamic Summit. Okay? And those will now all roll into this conference and seminars. Okay? Perfect. So you click OK, and now you have those line item details. And that's why it has a border around it. However, what if you go in and you're saying, well, for legal, we don't need that level of detail. What we want to do, though, is spread it, right? So great, it shows you seasonality here for last year. And yeah, you could take that, or you can do a seasonal spread. You can query the history of that account. Many different things you can do. In our example here, I'll just click apply, and this is showing you current year plus forecast, taking that for next year, which is 2016 that we're budgeting to, spreads it based on seasonality. You could save, or you could go and say, well, I know actually our business is growing, so legal is going to grow by 8%. Click apply, and every month adjust by 8%, without you having to do anything in Excel. So click OK, and now you can see that in the spreadsheet. So many other things you can do here. Maybe you want to go in and spread this somehow. Click apply. It's going to spread it, let's say evenly. Great, spreads it. If you want to spread it based on trend, great, spreads it based on trend. Then you go in and store that data back into the database. Now, what I haven't illustrated yet is everything I've been doing so far. I'm storing it, right? So your user can always drill in here and see that Alex, these are the conferences he budgeted. Here's why. They can view all of that. But so far, all I've been doing is storing data. What your users are going to do is they're actually going to go in here and click this check mark after they're finished. And that's workflow. So after they click this check mark, there's these folders here, based on your permission, that's what you'll be able to see. The people approving, they'll just go in here and maybe like a template such as this. Okay? They'll have all the templates here. Make it a little bigger for you guys. It'll have all the users. You could set start end dates so people cannot input after a certain time. And then you can see this demo user 1, for example, right? For personnel, they're up for approval. Why? Because they actually went in here, and this would be someone's name, they clicked that check mark. So after you, the administrator, approve them, it closes out the template. Okay? And you can see demo user 4, and he or she's kind of slacking. Maybe they save that data, but they haven't actually said, great, I'm finished. And by the way, you can monitor who saved data and when. That's just an easy report to run. Okay. So full workflow. And maybe a few more things that you can do on workflow, which I think are useful. You can run a report that says here's where people are with their templates. So this would probably all the different finance users or something like that. You could see their email addresses, which forms they're working on, and exactly where they are in the progress. Okay. Few more things here. What I'll show you is you can go in and same thing from approvers. Oh, sorry, I think we lost the GoToMeeting. All right, there you go. Same thing here. From the approver's perspective, maybe they want to see a kind of a quick dashboard, and these are actually quite useful for getting people to interact with their budgeting process more. You have your total expenses, and the point here is you can really just click, okay, and you can see all of the data here change as well. So if I'm looking at this and I no longer want to see salary for this account, maybe I want to see commissions, click, and I can see how the actual budgets are trending, and I can see how they trend by department. Okay. If I have comments, same thing. They're pretty useful here. You can review your budget comments. This is revenue expenses. You can have maybe a controller comments, maybe an executive comments. Why are we hiring more salespeople, the controller can ask, and maybe an executive said, look at the strategy initiative or something like that, right? Click that, and now that stores back into the database. Okay? So you can comment based on every single account. Okay? What else? So great, hopefully what you saw is, that initiative kind of can go back here. What you saw is you can forecast, very nice that it's linked to GP. You can model, you can go through and, this is important, by the way, you'll only see the templates that you have access to if you're an end user. Here I'm just an admin person. Then as an admin person, you'll only see this approval. You can create workflow and approve folks after they're finished. You can view comments, and you can have multi-level workflow too, if even then those approvers have to approve the previous approvers. And then right underneath here, you can view an actual to budget report, right? So you're not going to push stuff back into Excel. You can go back, and right here, you can view a report. It has your actuals, your forecast, your budget. You look at it here, you can drill into the data, and that year-to-date's coming from GP, the forecast and budget still coming from is coming from the system. Okay. By the way, pretty nice here. Have administration, you have the expenses, finance and accounting, HR. You can expand, see the accounts. But if I just wanted to see, say, one department, maybe just HR, you can go down here and you can say, I just want to see HR, click OK, refresh, and now you'll just see that one department. So very flexible. Okay. What else? You can start really getting, and this is now getting more into the budgeting and, the reporting and dashboarding. But just note, we absolutely do have dashboards that you can see, few reports, from both Subledger, Google Analytics, and you're not leaving this platform. So you can absolutely grow into this to really keep this as your enterprise reporting and then budget off of that, right? Something like this. And by the way, you can easily have done this with your budgeting templates. I just chose not to show it in that example, that you can deploy everything out to Excel. So you can go in here, click a button, and say, I want this template in Excel. Maybe you're getting on a flight or something like that. You don't have internet access anymore. And now when I open this up, I can see that this is all truly Excel. Okay. So if I wanted to say, my product revenue is going to grow here, when I click enter, all the data changes because all the formulas that were originally created in Excel are retained in the spreadsheet here. Okay. Very useful. But needless to say, if I want to run it for a different month or a different department or a different company, all of that, same thing as with all our templates are driven based on parameters. So if I wanted to run it for corporate US, I select that, and then maybe I want to run it for the next month, select that, click the button, and now it runs for corporate US for the month of April. Okay? And very useful for a reporting perspective. If you add a new account in GP, say you add account 40035, it's actually going to automatically appear here. Okay. So you have both reporting and budgeting in one place. Now, what I want to do is switch gears a little bit, and that was deploying everything on the web. Now let's look at how these templates were built and show you how you can also deploy it in Excel. And this is where we really would have to, on a case-by-case basis, figure out what your requirements are, where you are with your cloud strategy, and then from there we can recommend which deployment methodology would suit you best. So let's take a look. What I'll do now is open Excel. And the way your users are going to access this is, you can see that it's truly all Excel where it was built. There's just two tabs here, reporting and planning. Assignments, that's kind of a library folder. Now again, notice that your end users are only going to access it if you're not going through the web portal like this. You can see all of your reports, which we're kind of not going to chat about today, but all of them are here. And you have all the budgeting and forecasting templates here. Okay. Exact same thing as what we saw on the web portal. And just if we do want to compare, let's say, apples to apples, I'll go and open up the expenses with line item details, which is the exact same operational expense budgeting template that we saw. Okay. And then when I open this up, just notice how on the left-hand side, everything's translated in simple business terms. So your department's department, company's company. When you're building it, you don't have to know SQL. You don't really have to know any programming language. Our deployment methodology is really, leverage our existing templates, and we have a lot, and then build your own brand new templates and modify existing ones, right? So we train you guys, and then you guys should be able to create your own templates from there. Same thing here, and you can see you kind of pull them up. This is where you pull in the information. This now is from the perspective of the person building it, okay? You're going to be building the templates inside of here. So within this layout editor, you'll say, hey, I want to pull in, my expenses, okay? You'll say, I want to pull in year or date, and then you set your sheet filters, okay? All that's taught during training. But from a business user perspective, you go in here, okay? And you run the template, same exact thing as on the portal, based on certain parameters, right? So based on companies, full security settings still kicks in. You have your departments here. You have your period that you select. You click run, and based on this, and this is going to have some data, just because we all input data inside of here. You have your expenses over here on the right-hand side. Same thing. You have your actual plus forecast, and right below, all right, you have the accounts on your budgeting and on any other form. Here we got one blank here for intercompany expenses. So yeah, we could just type this in, or we could click that enter data button. And what that's going to do, if you kind of remember on the web portal when I went through and said, I want to spread it by seasonality, or I wanted to add, let's say, line item details. This is the exact same concept, right? So it pulls up a window here, and what we do within that is we can say, hey, what kind of intercompany expenses? Go down here, and you can say expenses adjusted. You can type in when it was adjusted or something like that. You could add comments here. So maybe within here you say January and May were the May month, and then you could keep going, right? So same thing as I did for your travel and entertainment. You can go through and add those line item details. And by the way, it's by no means limited. It just it'll keep increasing as you go through and add. Okay. If you want to do spreading, same thing. Maybe for the next account here, you just click this button, right? Pulls up the next account, and you want to spread it a certain way. Okay. So you can go in here. Actually, I didn't click that button. What you can do, for example, for this intercompany management expenses, you can say, hey, I want to copy the history, right? Great. And I want to increase it by a few percentage points. So same thing here. Unfortunately, there's no history on that account, but you can see here what it did. If I look at any of these guys right here, and you can go and click this enter data button, and it'll actually pull up those line item details that other folks are inputting. Okay. Same thing then, you go through, and if you want, you can store that data back into the database. So here, we'll look at a few ones with line item details here, right? You can go in here and say, hey, I want to copy the history, right? So it copies it, and then I want to increase it by a few percentage points. So it goes through and increases it. Okay. Great, you're done. Update Excel, and now that pushes back into the database. So again, everything's created in Excel and then pushed up to the web portal if that's how you want it done for input. If you don't, you just go in here, open up this assignments, and open up a template from within here. Okay? Maybe just to show you kind of a few more interesting templates, I'll go in here, and maybe what I'll do is just show you allocation. And this is very simple, and you can get much more complex, but you can go in here, apologies, click run. Okay. Pick your company, pick your period, pick how you want to allocate, and then based on this, you can go through, here's the account, and you can allocate based on the projects, which is on the column level, right? So pretty neat in terms of allocation, and then you can store that data back into the database. Okay. Let me give you a few more templates since we have some time. Sorry about that, guys. Give me 1 second. Let me turn off my Skype. Should have definitely done that. 1 sec. All right, my apologies. So now when I go through here, and maybe just to look at a few more allocation templates of some sort. This one, again, simple, but you're just allocating your employees out based on projects. So yeah, you run it, pick your company, pick your actual to budget, you run it. I'll give your employees all the departments. You can go in here and say, hey, Tracy working on project 3, maybe she's spending 15% of her time here. You can go in here and say, this person is also working on project 3. She's spending 20% of her time. They're perhaps also working on project 1, spending 5% of their time. And then if we scroll down here, it summarizes it, right? So it allocates the projects out and then stores it back. Okay. And again, right, you go, and then if you wanted to click and push all of this up onto the web portal. Boom. Okay. And then if I add that to the web portal, now your end user, all right, they'll go in, they'll log in here, like I showed, they go log in with their credentials, and they'll see those templates. Okay. Maybe just kind of a few more, right, now on the web portal. If you wanted them to, let's say, budget by project, maybe pick your parameters, you expand it, and you can say, here's project 3, here's which account it belongs to, here's the project type, here are the hours we're going to work on that project, here's the rate, here's the start and end date, and then it goes through and calculates those months and stores it back into the general ledger. And same thing here for expenses. Okay. If you do it in Excel, we can absolutely replicate it. Last template, and I actually really like this one. What it does, if I expand it, you can see you can budget by vendor, which a lot of people find useful. Why not? You'll go and say vendor 3, let's budget this out. You can add line item details to those too, to say what exactly are we budgeting, and it goes through, and if you want, you can bring in the history of that too, right? So for every account, which are the vendors contributing to that? Okay? You go in, add that, you can add those line item details, and then store that data back into the database. Last thing I'll say is we have a lot of different verticals, and if I look at something like this, You have all the various industries. You can log in here. And yeah, while we have a lot of these different examples, you're going to be able to create them on your own as well. Want to wrap up and kind of go through this really quickly and summarize, and then see if anyone has any questions. You know, what we showed today is we started off and said, hey, you log in through a web portal and you see all the budgeting templates. You know, your approvers can approve them, and all that's on the web portal. Then what I showed you is open Excel, and you can create a template and then deploy everything in Excel as well. So your choice on how to deploy, but you're creating it with our Excel add-in. And if you're interested in the actual creation of it, I encourage you to take a look at the previous webinar that we did on reporting, on replacing management reporter. And you can see that what we did was we built a template, added some functionality, and turned it into a budgeting template. So with that said, you know, what I want to do is leave my contact information here. And I know we're kind of right at the top of the hour here. So if you have any questions, we're going to pause this recording, and feel free. We're going to open it up to the audience, ask, and I'll go through and make sure to address this.